Good afternoon and welcome to Across the Fence. I'm Jolie Whitney. Have you ever visited a museum and wondered, how did that get here? This question is at the center of the spring exhibition going on now at the Fleming Museum of Art on UVM's campus. Never Spoken Again, Rogue Stories of Science and Collections explores the myths surrounding museums and collecting practices, past and present. To help us interrogate this topic, I'm joined by Sonja Lunde, the director of the Fleming Museum. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jolie. It's nice to meet you.
Absolutely, we're glad to have you here. And before we get started, why choose to have this exhibit?
This is a great time to have this exhibition at the Fleming now because it was curated by a man named David Alfonso Ayala, who is interested in exploring topics of origin stories behind the objects that we see every day in our museums. This is a topic that we have been grappling with and interested in exploring at the Fleming for many, many years. And it's just a wonderful time to bring that conversation to the campus of the University of Vermont.
And what are people going to see when they visit?
They're going to see contemporary works of art by 17 international artists working across a variety of media, including photography, drawing, sculpture, ceramics, film, painting. They're going to see a little bit of everything. Installation work as well.
Very multi-medium then.
Very, yes.
And let's talk a little about the word rogue. Is this kind of exhibit out of the norm?
Well, it is meant to spark conversation and thinking around really the meaning of that word and the narrative and the through line that runs through this exhibition, which is a departure from traditional museum narratives and trying to push ourselves to think sort of beyond just looking at a work of art aesthetically and thinking about the story behind why it was made, how it came into the museum, and so on.
And this exhibit uses a little bit of fiction to kind of reconsider that history and make us rethink about that. Can you tell me a little about that?
That's correct. There's actually an object in the exhibition. There's a taxidermied parrot from the Fairbanks Museum that we borrowed from the Fairbanks Museum in St. Johnsbury. And the reason why it's there, that was sort of the curator's idea when he was exploring collections in the Natural History Museum of Berlin, and found this parrot in their collection with a story attached to a person, a historian, a 19th century historian who collected it. And they were varying different stories about how this parrot came to be. Was it a gift from a member of the royal family? Was it a bird that was the last living species to speak a quote unquote dead indigenous language? There were different stories, and so it really sort of sparked the curator's thinking about the myths and the stories we sort of make up for ourselves about these objects in museums. So why not have a little fun with that and actually invite the visitor in the gallery to come up with their own imaginatory stories about this object and other objects in the museum.
And you mentioned the Fairbanks Museum in St. Johnsbury, which I grew up going to. How many other museums, to your knowledge, in Vermont do you guys work with for this exhibit?
The parrot is on loan from the Fairbanks, and we have some other objects in the exhibition from the Fleming's collection. And that was also a deliberate choice by the curator to work with our staff here locally to interrogate and investigate the collections that came to Vermont from all parts around the world. So there are a few objects in the exhibition that we pulled from our collection of over 24,000 objects.
Nice, and then I guess if they've seen the parrot before, now they get a little more backstory to it.
That's right.
And you mentioned the parrot a little bit, and let's dive into kind of the science component. It's in the title of the exhibit. Can you tell me about the relationship of science to this exhibition?
A lot of museums that were sort of born in this Euro-American tradition of collecting came to be out of what I think we would call now almost sort of a pseudoscience origin. A lot of collecting at times has really been used to legitimize certain practices that can be troubling. including this whole concept of who discovered what and discovery. Many times, especially in 19th and early 20th century exploration, a lot of scientists, trained or not, educated or not, traveled the world sort of under that sort of legitimate academic umbrella term of scientific exploration, claimed to discover things about human, not only art making, but life and culture around the world. And this term just, claiming discovery of things that frankly indigenous folks have known about and or lived through their own experiences for thousands of years. So that's an interesting topic that's being explored in this exhibition as well.
And can you tell me how this way of this exhibition and the way it looks at art kind of feeds into the way that the Fleming has gone through its own kind of re-identification and Fleming Reimagined?
Yeah, I think many, especially regular visitors to the Fleming, may have an awareness of this conceptual framework that we like to call Fleming Reimagined, which essentially is just a way of thinking and talking about evolving museum practice into the present day and thinking, forward. It's baking into everything we do this idea that for hundreds, thousands of years even, but certainly hundreds of years in the practice of museum work, there are many, many voices that have either been erased or de-emphasized in terms of the art that's been collected and exhibited in museums. And this exhibition, Never Spoken Again, really aligns with those values and the commitment to working that way, which is so important also on the campus of a university, where these kinds of conversations are happening, across disciplines, across colleges, across departments.
And you mentioned that commitment, and Fleming has been doing this work since before you started in the program. What made you want to continue this?
Well, that's maybe not a difficult question to answer for me at all. It's really just sort of a mindset and just an interest in expanding sort of beyond a traditional art historical canon, knowing sort of that there's always sort of more to the story. There are always there's always more artists and art making and craft and narratives that have been told beyond this sort of very selective, curated selection of works that maybe we've grown up with in books or in our museum galleries. So for me, frankly, it's more interesting, and it also that mindset and way of working lends itself to just being more welcoming and inclusive.
So as a museum goer, is that something I should be cautious of everything and be suspicious of every piece in a museum?
I don't know if I would use the word suspicious. I think that, I think people can enjoy art for art's sake. The aesthetics of a painting can be sort of taken in and just enjoyed for what it is. But I also think, like any other art form, whether it's movies, dance, music, I hope people coming to art museums feel more empowered to form their own opinions and really spark their own conversations with themselves, with their friends and family, anybody who they maybe came to visit with. I think for a long time, there's been a tradition in fine art museums that conversation is one directional, that it's sort of the museum telling visitors about the art and sort of what to think about the art. And this sort of new way of working through this sort of conceptual framework, again, that we call Fleming Reimagined. And lots of museums are starting to work more this way. I hope actually just inspires more participation and a more welcoming environment.
And the Fleming Museum is now working with the UVM School of Art. Can you tell me about that collaboration, how that's going?
That's right. UVM, earlier in 2022, UVM ratified and formed a new School of the Arts within its College of Arts and Sciences. And it encompasses the Fleming Museum of Art and the Lane series, and also the programs in art and art history, theater, and dance. and music. And it's really wonderful because the Fleming Museum, as part of that arts cohort on campus, really is able to function collaboratively with our colleagues across all of those disciplines.
And for maybe someone who's more familiar with the Fleming coming to look for a specific piece, if that's missing, or if any of the art they recognize isn't there, what do you have to say to them?
Well, I guess I would say that we have over 24,000 objects in the Fleming's collection, and we want to show those to people. So we have a limited amount of space in our galleries to exhibit them, so we rotate objects often. And the hope is that every time somebody comes to the Fleming, there's actually something new to see, and there's a new conversation to have.
And we've talked about this exhibit going on now, but what do you guys have coming up this month at the Fleming?
Actually, on Saturday, March 2nd at 2 p.m., we have a wonderful exhibition tour by our curator of collections, Kristen Hansen, and our manager of collections and exhibitions, Margaret Tamulonis. They will take visitors through this exhibition, and for anybody who's interested in spending a little extra time with them, they will also give a tour of our learning studio upstairs in the museum, where our staff has pulled a few items from our founding collections to continue that conversation from the exhibition gallery and relate it more directly to some of the objects in our collection.
And how about a little more long-term, the landmarks? I believe it's the landmarks exhibit.
Sure.
Can you tell me a little about that?
Yes, upstairs on our mezzanine level, we are exhibiting almost 24 landscapes from the Fleming's collection, and we've chosen them particularly because they all depict in some way some kind of human intervention with the landscape. And so we're having, again, this conversation that, like, you know, maybe in passing, this painting might look like a typical 19th century pastoral view of some small town in Vermont that many of us are familiar with. But if we look again and we sort of dig a little deeper and we investigate or ask ourselves sort of who lived in that house, you know, who were the workers in this factory or in this mine, and what was going on in our history of our state at that time when this painting was made, or what is being depicted in this painting beyond just sort of the aesthetic sort of beauty of it. So that's a really interesting exhibition that will be on view through the middle of May.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sonja.
Thank you, Julie.
Never Spoken Again, Rogue Stories of Science and Collections runs through May 18th. Admissions to the Fleming is free. Visit the Fleming's website for more details. That wraps up our program for today. From the crew behind the scenes here at WCAX, I'm Jolie Whitney. Thank you for watching and have a good one.